Good evening, everyone. It really has been amazing to work with the subcommittee with diversity and inclusion, and I think that our meetings that we've had were really, I think they work well because we really sought to understand each other first and listened and tried to be very planful and mindful after our meetings. This image was actually perfect. Roger DeBell, the principal at Thornell Road, who's here tonight, actually sent me a text of just something that popped up at Thornell Road Elementary School, where a parent and a teacher, right, were just making a bulletin board. And I thought it was just so nice because you see these subtle things happening in our schools so often. I thought this would be a perfect image to start the evening. So tonight, really, in working with the Diversity and Inclusion Committee, we built the agenda primarily off of what we were hearing relative to what parents were requesting. So tonight you're going to hear from us things relative to the work that we're currently doing as it relates to diversity and inclusion, some of our future thoughts related to the area. We're going to touch on professional development, and we're going to drill down with professional development from lunch, recess monitors, to bus drivers, to administrators, to teachers, etc. You're going to hear an update relative to curriculum and instruction, including materials and resources. You're going to hear about DASA practices, interventions, and preventions, and you're also going to hear some information as it relates to our school climate. So today, actually, the last couple of weeks have been really straining as it relates to the March 14th planning. And I thought this was amazing. Today, I looked at what's happening at Calkins Road Middle School, and I thought immediately to inclusion. And so during a time of tragedy, our students came together towards a common goal, and this will be ongoing at Calkins Road. This particular exercise is where the students are actually writing messages to the students and families at Parkland. And then as I walked down the hall today towards a meeting, I saw this at Barker Road. And Barker Road has several activities planned as well. And I do think of inclusion in this terms the same I would at Calkins Road, where the students and staff are making the connections between our state and that Parkland, Florida is another state, and we're dotted, we're connected, and they are doing this in preparation for 17 acts of kindness that they've committed to at Barker Road. So I thought I would share that with you as an introduction. Probably the hardest part in looking at something so big is to breaking something so big into bite-sized pieces. And as a start, we thought about just working on some common language together as it relates to this topic. Through the work of working with PTSA, with our district planning team, with research and literature and magazine articles and consultants and speakers, and trying to pull different pieces around how do we define some of these big terms, because I'm sure if I asked many of you individually, what do you mean by diversity versus inclusion versus inclusivity, we would have different responses. So I think it's important to just take a second and look at how, as a district, we're trying to wrap our head around what we mean by diversity. And we look at it and define it as really all the ways that we differ, period. Anything that makes us unique is part of the definition of diversity. So we're taking a pretty wide global look at our definition of this. We started to look at naming diversity a little bit different, but we thought this was a real positive definition of the word. In inclusion, we looked at bringing people together and making someone part of something bigger and embracing the diversity in a real powerful way. And then the last definition relative to inclusivity is taking both of the terms, diversity and inclusion, and turning them into action by creating a school environment of engagement, respect, and connection where ideas, backgrounds, and perspectives are tied together in a caring environment. So I just want to pause there for a second and have you take that in. That's close to the next end in mind as we look at this subject. If we're able to take diversity and inclusion, both in the schools and in the community, and put them together into action and create something that is that allows us an atmosphere where we can share ideas and have dialogues and understand and appreciate different people's backgrounds and practice empathy and do all of this together in a caring environment. That is a goal. So as we enter tonight, with a better understanding of some key language, our focus can now turn to a higher level of continuous improvement. So what areas do we start to look at? Part of continuous improvement is tonight, is to start our conversations around this topic in a more formal type of setting. Having said that, I want it to be informal as well. I want people to feel really comfortable. I want people to feel relaxed. But I also want to acknowledge a few different things. Right now in this room, there's absolutely varying degrees of knowledge and comfort talking about these topics. There's absolutely going to be now and all the way through different views about approach, pacing, and outcomes. So knowing that in advance, but how we work through that is going to be critical. There's a commitment from the district to implementing proven best practices over time. There's also a commitment to look at data within our district relative to identifying our strengths and our weaknesses around these topics. There's a commitment to listening to students, parents, and staff voices. And there's a commitment to building on our strengths in order to cause change. I think that part's critical. So you see some key words in there that, like best practices, listening, strengths, change. All of those things are things that we can do together. And I loved your introduction about probably the best way to do that is to approach this with an open heart and an open mind and being able to talk. So digging into the concept of the diversity for a second, as we talk about this, all the things that make us unique, the list truly is endless. Some examples that you can see in the wheel up here, but we talk about race makes us diverse, and age makes us diverse, and religion, and thought, and ethnicity, and sexual orientation, and appearance, and learning style, and so much more. Our goal is to harness this diversity and make this something that we're proud of and make this a strength of ours. The work of our Board of Ed and our district planning team and our administrators and teachers and others has the last couple of years has really been around creating a framework around our mission, vision, and values. And because that framework lends itself perfectly with much of this work. And I want to just take you through this really quickly because this does allow a certain level of alignment to what we're discussing tonight. Relative to the mission, our board was really adamant that part of that mission, the work that we do right now, reflects that we're making a difference, that our kids are able to make a difference in other students' lives. And so that's one of the things that we feel that we are doing right now. We are working really hard on a daily basis to have our students be their best, do their best to make a difference in the lives of others. Some of you in the room are part of the district planning team, and this was a painstaking process where our district planning team, along with our Board of Education, went back and forth, I want to say 400 times. And there was a ton of buy-in. This went in front of over 100 people in a summer retreat. And then different people through time at the district planning team. But we came up with a pretty vivid description of what we hope our future will bring. For the purposes of tonight, the area in red I think are the most critical, which says that our students will have the skills and competence necessary to understand and thrive in a diverse global society. That's one of the things as we look beyond today. The things that we feel are important and the things that our vision will allow us to drive some of the change to get us closer to that. There's a lot to the vision. It's a very descriptive, it's called a vivid description of our future. But you'll see words in here also about the promise of education, transformational partnerships with students and families and professionals and community, because it's going to need all of us to create a vision for the future that we can make as bright as possible for our students. And then we look at our set of core values. And again, it's the very similar approach, the Board of Education and our district administrators, building administrators, district planning team. And what we felt was really important as we move forward, the principles that guide on a daily basis how we function, the things that are really critical to how we behave, the things that are going to help drive how we get to our vision are things like always making decisions based on what's best for students, that we're student-centered, that we have a supportive environment for all. As we started this process, we left it as supportive environment for all. In our actual document, you'll see a parentheses that says students, families, and staff, because we wanted this to be a very comprehensive notion of what we mean by that. And when I talk about, and when we talk about supportive environments for all, that's all encompassing. That means what we're doing on Facebook. That means what we're putting out to the community, what we're listening, the dialogue that we're having needs to be supportive. That means what our students are doing and how their students are acting. Our expectation, one of our values, is that we're supportive and that we're supporting all of our needs. That we're highly collaborative, that we're progressive, and that we're always focused on continuous improvement. These are the things that drive us to getting to our vision. So part of the approach that we've taken throughout this process, and just to share some of the thinking, back in 2003, it was actually a pretty dark time in Pittsford, and for some of you that weren't there, just want to give you a synopsis. I remember it like yesterday. I think some of the board members remember it like it was yesterday, and probably some of the staff remember this as well. And this all started with something that no one really knew was a big issue at the time per se. And it started with a display in one of our elementary schools of a decorated evergreen tree. And the display was put up in December. And so it seemed like it looked like a Christmas tree. And that sent a lot of people into a tailspin, saying, how can you decorate the school with Christmas symbols during this time when we have so many different faiths and religions in the school? Well, shortly after this started brewing, the display was taken down. And after the tree was taken down, there was a full-blown divide in the community, full-blown. And this is pre-social media days. And people were livid. It actually got to the point where it made it to CNN. Someone in a horse grabbed a letter and took it all the way out to CNN and said, here's what's happening. And from there, it turned into some real nasty things. It turned into death threats. It turned into graffiti. It turned into a lot of unrest in our community and in our school. And so then, shortly after this happened, we actually started a committee called ROAC, which is our Religious Observance Advisory Committee. And from that group, it allowed us to access and be part of the committee several religious leaders, teachers, students, teachers, administrators, and the role of, and parents, and the role of this group was to provide advice as to how to implement best practices as it relates to religion in the schools. From that, and this was not easy, this did not happen overnight, but it spawned new regulations, and new guidelines, and new practices, and new understanding and professional development. And it became, over time, a healing process. It became a group that if teachers weren't sure if they could play a Christmas song during a concert in December, who would advise them? And the discourse happened at the committee level, and that led to a lot of different things happening in the buildings and across the district. It yielded things like students creating, I think, 20 different videos about different faiths and different religions and different backgrounds, and posting them on our website so our staff could learn about different backgrounds. It led to things like the school calendar that you have right now, where we list religious observations throughout, and descriptions. So the committee played a role then, and so as we were thinking about an approach to diversity and inclusivity, and doing it without having to have a Christmas tree incident, that's something that we have to react to right now. We were thinking that learning from our past, and something that really helped us guide us moving forward, to explore the concept of an Inclusivity Advisory Committee. And it's called Inclusivity because you saw the definition of that actionable part around diversity and inclusion that we want to get to, that has a climate that's supportive of all. The charter, so the work that you're seeing right on the screen is all in draft form. Our district planning team has broken into a subgroup who is working on a potential charter that will then, I think this week or next week, go back to the district planning team and then to the Board of Education for consideration. So the charter mirrors the definition of inclusivity. As we're processing through this, we're looking at similar types of guidance that can happen from this Inclusivity Committee as it did with ROAC, a Religious Advisory Committee, and more. So we don't want to close the door on anything that's not in bullet form as you see it there. Then we talked about who could possibly serve on this committee, because it's not as simple as different religions and faiths. And so we talked about the importance of having a similar base membership of bringing in administrators and teachers and parents. We talked about the importance of having an urban-suburban parent member, 2 central office team members, and then looking at what types of experts we would pull in above and beyond. And the categories that we came up with were experts in the field of mental health, special education, someone that can reflect interfaith, sexual orientation, gender, equity, diversity, and inclusion. Those are the categories in addition to the people that we would be relying on to carry this work forward, which is why it's critical to have teachers and administrators and parents also on there to vet what's being discussed and to look at the practicality and impact. So if I were to kind of pull things together a little bit, just so you can see it on one slide, the connections as we're talking about this framework that we've been building, the connections between the committee that you just heard of, creating a school environment of engagement, respect, and connection where ideas, backgrounds, and perspectives are tied together in a caring environment. With our vision, skills, and competence necessary to understand and thrive in a diverse global society, to our mission, making a difference in the lives of others, to our core values, student-centered, collaborative, and supportive environment. I also talked about the importance of using data to guide our decisions. You heard me say that at the beginning, and we need something other than conjecture and opinions, at the beginning at least, that will help us identify the strengths and weaknesses that we have in these areas. We need to look at multiple different types of data. We need to consider qualitative and quantitative data. And just to give you a couple examples of things that we're doing now and things that we're thinking of. One is around racial diversity. So trying to get a sense of what is Pittsford and where are we, what types of people are in our community. And what we've seen as we started to look at this is that over the past 10 years in Pittsford, our racial diversity has increased by 13%, with the largest growth in our Asian population, followed by our Hispanic population. So you can see on the bars, as you move over to the right, the increase in different subgroups as it relates to diversity. And then we look to where do we stand within the county. Some of the things that I've heard multiple times is that we are the least diverse, racially diverse school district, and it simply isn't true. You can see where we stand relative to racial diversity, and you can see all the schools that are less racially diverse than we are. So when you look at Pittsford in relation to the county, we are pretty much right in the middle of the pack. So we are not the least racially diverse. We're actually right in the middle of Monroe County. Other things that we're looking at, different types of data, and we're doing this now. And so we're building databases right now where we can look at subgroups from gender to race and ethnicity, to our urban-suburban participants, to our family's economic status, to our special education, including 504s, and our English language learners, and comparing all the different subgroups to access to programs and participation in programs, to types of behavioral issues and the types of resolutions, to grade point averages, to participation, to diploma type, to college attendance, to scholarships, and more. And looking at these types of data will help inform, are there areas that we need to be cognizant of as it relates to making improvement. Does everyone understand that portion of it? So we want to look at multiple types of data, compare them to subgroups, and see if there's discrepancies. Other examples of data that we want to collect are specific to qualitative data. It's important to also understand not only the hard data that can be supported by numbers, but how are people feeling? And I share this as an example of one of the data points. This is a federal survey that's up here as a draft that we've pulled because, and we're giving it a real hard look, because this is a survey that is accessible to students, support staff, teaching staff, and administrators, and parents. And each survey is a little bit different. And if we participate in the survey, the bonus is that the information is disaggregated for us and sent back to us. So for example, it would be great if we could do this, something like this. We have a committee to look at the data and how it's disaggregated, and then begin to talk about what would be good next steps. What are things that we can celebrate, and what are things that we need to address? But you can see some of the questions that are on there. This is a sample from the student survey. Other things that are happening behind the scenes, and what I didn't want to make today about was a checklist, but I do want to share some of the things that are happening at the Board of Education and district level as we look towards this topic. We've looked at recruitment. We have attended a Minority and Latino Jobs Fair just recently in New York City, taken training in diversified workforce and pathways to teaching. We've changed our website so that it's fully accessible to, I forget how many different languages, but a lot. We've changed our enrollment forms, which is something really subtle, so that it can be accessible in multiple language, but it's also gender neutral. We've looked at our Student Opportunity Fund, and this year through KEEP, which is our Keeping Education Extraordinary in Pittsford, it's our school foundation. We looked at donating half of all the funds that we receive from United Way and putting it into the Student Opportunity Fund in a way that students and families that may need financial support can access that money in a real easy, simple process. We've done quite a bit of work with the Jewish Federation. Melanie recently visited Israel, and through the Jewish Federation, and making connections with schools there in our schools here. We've attended things like Standing Together Against Hate, Jewish Council connections. I've done a lot with Nazareth College, with the YMCA and person to person, and also have attended different workshops from different superintendents that are starting these conversations. One from Ithaca and one from Shenandoah, and that took place recently. Further plans that were supported by the Board of Education and our district office together is planning for and attending a national summit for educational equity. And I share this with you as it's actually pretty exciting, because we're going to send representations from the elementary, middle, high school, and the district level to begin looking nationally at national experts around topics such as eliminating barriers through culturally responsive teaching, ensuring equity in project-based learning, inspiring courage to excel through self-efficacy, and exploring non-traditional careers, so you can get a sense of some of the topics that are there. I'm going to turn it over now to Melanie to continue with the curriculum and instruction portion. Thank you.
I'm going to share with you a little bit about what's been happening relative to diversity and inclusivity in the areas of professional development and curriculum and instruction in a very broad way. And before I dive in, I want to just say a couple of things. First of all, I want to say that I'm enormously proud of the professional development that Pittsford provides to all of its staff members, and I'm very proud of the work that we do out of our curriculum office, and I'm excited to be able to share some of those things. But I also recognize that there's always room for improvement. So this is just part of our continuous improvement process. And do we have everything perfect yet? Absolutely not. But we'll continue to learn and grow and make improvements as we do that learning together. We're going to start by talking a little bit about some of our professional development offerings over the last several years, in terms of both the participants and some of the specific trainings that we have been able to bring to our staff. So administrators, teachers, paraprofessionals, lunch and recess monitors, bus drivers, office personnel, all have the opportunity to receive training. Some of the trainings that are offered to some of these groups are would be more specifically aligned with our inclusivity movements than others, but I think if we are also able to think together about any time that we're working with any of our staff on how to treat children kindly and respectfully and help them through problem-solving situations and how to get along, and that big umbrella of social emotional thinking, that really, to me, all weaves together into what we're talking about tonight. So from a very, very big overview, from July 2015 until now, although I have to say that now was probably February instead of March, and there's actually been things that have happened in the intervening month from when we were originally planned to be here. You can see the numbers. Those are numbers of staff members that have participated in trainings in each of these three big bucket areas: mental health, wellness, and diversity inclusion. And it does get difficult sometimes to tease some of those things apart from each other and to say, well, which one of those buckets would you put this particular training in? But let me just give you some examples of some titles, and then I'm going to talk more specifically about some particular offerings. So in these big categories, we have brought things to our staff like youth mental health first aid, emotional trauma, compassion fatigue, ACEs, or adverse childhood experiences, traumatic stress in education. We've brought workshops on child sexual abuse. Bavona has been here to work with our teachers and our entire administrative staff. We've done a lot of work on anxiety and depression and other kinds of mental health issues in the schools. We've done a lot of work over the last several years on mindfulness, and teachers have gone through several different levels of mindfulness training, and they bring those practices into their classrooms as a way of building some cohesiveness in their community, helping kids reduce their stress levels so that they can be happier and healthier in the classroom. We've done work on integrating mind and body, a holistic approach to mental health, creating emotionally healthy classrooms, poverty, creating safe and inclusive schools, IEP progress monitoring, work around English language learners, and the list goes on and on and on. It's a very, very broad offering, and I would be remiss if I didn't right now thank Dr. Von Brogan. She has really spearheaded much of the professional development efforts that I've just named off under her office, and our district's real strong focus on wellness and mental health. So looking a little bit more deeply at some of the professional development offerings that may align more tightly with our topic tonight than others. We have been working with the OUT Alliance, formerly the Gay Alliance, since 2014 to bring training to our teachers, our paraprofessionals, our administrators on creating safe and inclusive schools for LGBT students and staff members. You can see on the slide the percent of administrators and board members who have gone through that training, and we were at 100%, and then we had a new administrator join our ranks this year, and those things happen. Our teachers, 38% of our teachers have gone through this training, And at one point, 100% of our paraprofessional staff had gone through some training because we provided it on a superintendent's conference day when we had a really nice captive audience. We continue to offer this training. There are additional sessions, I think, going on even this month. This continues to be a topic of great interest. And in addition to this initial 3-hour training that the Out Alliance makes available to us, we've had an additional 72 staff members go through the Out Alliance's Safe Zone training to provide them with a deeper set of skills for working with LGBT students and staff members around a safe and inclusive environment. In 2015, we started offering some workshops specific to understanding poverty and the impacts of poverty on our classrooms. John Strasabasco, who's a retired Pittsford teacher, has really led this work for us, and his workshops are very well received. Again, there's another set of workshops on this very topic in our catalog right now this spring. So you can see, again, the percentages of our staff who have gone through at least one level of this training, and he now provides two different levels of training. Coincidentally, Jean Strasabasco also helps provide training, also a retired Pittsford teacher, and starting just this past fall, October 2017, she started offering a hidden biases workshop for our staff. And so this is, we're in our first year of making this offering available. It hasn't yet hit a summer catalog, which is where we tend to be able to grab the biggest audience of teachers. But it's been a very, very well received, and I think a very important training for our staff. Significantly, we work closely with our lunch and recess monitors, particularly at the elementary level. They play a very important part in every child's day at the elementary level. And so while we don't necessarily we don't have structures to necessarily make some of those specific trainings I just talked about available to our lunch and recess monitors, they do go through some training every September with their building administrators. Elementary principals work very closely with our lunch and recess monitors on an ongoing basis, and their work is really focused at each building on our SEL core principles, using whatever language and flavor that takes at each building. So at Thornell Road, they talk about the Thornell Road Way. At Allen Creek, they've introduced their ACEs program, which stands for Accepting, Caring, Empathetic, and Supportive. And so using the language that's particular to that building culture, we work with our lunch and recess monitors, really providing them with the skills that they need to be keeping a watchful eye on kids, being able to step in when it looks like there may be some conflict occurring, helping children who might look like they don't have anybody to sit with or play with, be able to connect with friends. They're really our first eyes of defense in what can be a very unstructured but very, very important time for our children. And there's so much learning that happens during that time. So these are really critical folks for us. Our administrators are on their playgrounds and they're in their cafeterias always, so they're also an eye on what's happening, and they're also providing great modeling to our lunch and recess monitors in terms of the types of behavior and interactions that they want to see promoted. We have a couple of our schools that through generous donations from PTSA have buddy benches out on their playground, a place where a child, if they're feeling like they don't have a friend to play with at recess, they can go sit on the buddy bench, and the other kids know that here's somebody who's looking to join a game or is looking for a friend or somebody to just spend some time with, and so they can go grab somebody off the buddy bench and be able to invite them to participate and play. And then we also have lunch buddies programs at all of our schools as well. Lunch and recess are an important time for this work. Our bus drivers and attendants, again, often very, very important sets of eyes on our kids during less structured time. And so our bus drivers also receive a lot of training. Some of that is required by New York State. Some of that is training that we feel is important. So every new driver has to complete a 3-hour pre-service training that includes work on bullying prevention. Every new driver also has to complete a 30-hour course that includes both bullying training and anti-bullying training and special needs training. Our bus attendants also go through training on working with children with special needs. And many of our drivers also have attended the SCIP training, which stands for Strategies for Crisis Intervention and Prevention, so that they're armed with ways to safely intervene with children on the buses who may need a little extra support. So transitioning from professional learning to the area of curriculum and instruction, we're going to look briefly at some of our specific course offerings, our curriculum resources and instruction, and then some building-based initiatives that don't technically fall under the area of curriculum, but kind of bleed over into the instructional program at each building. So this is just a sampling of some of the offerings primarily at our high schools, but of course health is at the middle schools as well and the elementary schools, where students will have an opportunity to engage in important conversations relative to diversity and inclusivity, examining their own values, looking at society's messages, really digging deeply into learning about religions around the world, looking at contemporary issues, minority issues, etc. So those first three on the list are social studies electives, then of course health, which hits at every level, and film as literature and mass media and society are two English 12th grade electives that provide us with an opportunity to help students explore current events through different forms of media. In terms of the curriculum itself, the actual documented written curriculum to which we expect every teacher to adhere, this is the mission statement of our curriculum, and it echoes our district strategic initiative in our desire to engage all students in authentic, rigorous learning experiences. We know that for that to happen in an equitable way for all students, it needs to be built right into the curriculum. And the ultimate goal of our curriculum is that students leave us able to achieve whatever their goals are that allow them to become contributing members to a global society. We understand that no matter what you teach, what course, what grade level, what age student, you have a responsibility to provide students with opportunities to interact with diverse people, diverse ideas, and multiple perspectives in order for kids to leave us prepared for success. Our curriculum is built on a foundation of some pretty big essential questions. These are questions that spiral through the curriculum K-12 that we expect students to engage with over and over again as they move through particular courses of study. So these are some examples of essential questions that students should be struggling with through their curricular experiences K-12. I've pulled these from art, English, music, social studies, world language, so you can see that across many, many disciplines, we are expecting our students through our curricular program to engage in some pretty big thinking around culture, differences, perspective taking, and the impact of one's own life on other lives. So closely connected with curriculum, but a little bit differently, are the resources that we use to implement our curriculum. So I'm just going to give you a couple of examples here of work that's in progress or ongoing. Our K-12 ELA leaders were asked last year to take a bit of an inventory of the books that are referenced in our curriculum documents as being either required for a particular unit of study or listed in a curriculum document as a supplementary book or a book that kids might choose to read during a book club experience in an English class, for example. And so they worked with their steering committee to do a review of all of that, looking for books that were either authored by or featured a protagonist that was female or member of any non-dominant culture. So they literally went through every grade level, every curriculum. They identified some gaps, and they've been working since then to fill those gaps by bringing in additional book selections into the curriculum where appropriate. Depending on the unit of study, it may be more or less appropriate to broaden the scope of text that we offer to our students. Our library department has been heavily engaged in this work over the last couple of years, looking not only at their collections in the library, but this year they have been working together in a collegial circle entitled Cultural Competencies in Literature and Life. So they're really going pretty deeply into this. Part of this work focuses on assessing the current level of diversity in our library book collections, as well as effectively increasing diversity in a culturally sensitive manner. They're working with a professor of English and philosophy from MCC and another professor from SUNY Geneseo as they do this work together and this learning together, and they're very, very excited about what they've been doing. In social studies, of course, that provides us with a great opportunity to really broaden kids' perspectives on the world, and primary source documents are a very, very important part of the resources that we use in social studies K-12. And so because we use primary source documents to teach history, by default, or perhaps by effort, that means that we are putting in front of our kids documents written by all kinds of people all over the world: women, Native Americans, slaves during pre-Civil War time in the United States, African Americans, citizens of colonized countries and cultures, so that our kids have an opportunity to hear history told through firsthand accounts of people kind of on all sides of the story of history, which is, for our social studies teachers, the most exciting part about teaching social studies. So looking a little bit now, a little even more broadly in terms of our instructional resources and materials, I think about things like some of the supplemental materials and making sure that every child has an opportunity to see him or herself reflected in those materials. So everything from those books in the classroom libraries to art supplies to making sure that music from a variety of composers to posters on walls and hallways, that we're making an effort to make sure that every child, every family sees themselves and feels reflected in the materials that surround them all day and every day. Again, we've talked a little bit about some of those primary source documents that are such an important part of our social studies instruction. And social studies, of course, doesn't just teach history. History, a very important part of social studies, is learning perspective taking. So a couple of examples there are we engage our kids in global studies in looking at some documents written by, for example, folks from India during the time that India was a part of the British colonies. So really hearing that voice around colonization. Our students also were engaged in viewing the documentary film 30 Days Living as a Muslim, which you may or may not be familiar with. It's my understanding it's the experience of a white male from West Virginia who goes to live with a Muslim family in Detroit, I believe, for 30 days. And in doing so, really breaks down a lot of his own barriers and stereotypes and really comes to experience the Muslim community in a very different way than he had ever understood it previously. So we try to give our kids those kinds of opportunities. In English, we, of course, I think at the time that I reached out to my English standards leader, he said, well, like right now, we've got kids engaged in studying poetry of African American and Caribbean poets. We were looking at the Harlem Renaissance and the Jazz Age as a lead up to literary modernism and the reading of The Great Gatsby. Looking at the narrative life of Frederick Douglass, et cetera. So lots of examples. When I talk to the folks at the high schools especially, they can't, their examples just keep going and going and going, which is exciting. And then again, at each building, we have things going on that are often connected to our social emotional learning initiative at each building. And so you'll see things like a Principal's Book of the Month or an All School Reads initiative. And the books are usually very carefully selected around some kind of theme, around empathy or diversity or inclusion or friendship, et cetera. So really engaging kids and in many cases families in the reading of common literature that helps to bring some of these really important topics up for the kids. We have many teachers who practice responsive classroom practices, doing things like holding pretty formalized class meetings on a very regular basis. It's part of their daily routine to get kids in a circle and really work on not only their speaking and listening skills together, but their empathy skills, their perspective taking, problem solving, et cetera. Many of our schools use classroom compacts where the kids work together to determine what the appropriate ways are to behave and treat each other in this classroom. And you can go into classrooms all over the district and see classroom compacts that talk about treating each other with respect and being kind and being thoughtful. And then we've had a big emphasis on social thinking, which is really about perspective taking through the eyes of a child. And so in February, it was Black History Month. So again, a lot of our schools had made an effort to have some displays in their library. And then actually at the bottom is, I love the picture. Those are some kids from Allen Creek and a project that they had done for Black History Month. And their construction paper card, cutouts say, "He had a dream, we are the dream." So that hopefully gives you a little flavor. And again, I'll be happy at the end to entertain any questions, but I'm going to turn it over to Pat Von Brogan to share the next chapter.
Yes. Thanks again for having us here this evening. It's exciting to be with all of you. I was asked to share some information related to the Dignity for All Students Act. So that's DASA, as we know it, D-A-S-A, DASA. And I'm going to share with you at least a snippet of information. It's a pretty massive topic. So the first thing I'm going to share with you about DASA is that there's a term called VADER that is usually associated with DASA. So DASA and VADER very often go together. VADER is Violent and Disruptive Incident Reporting. So from the state perspective, school districts have been reporting DASA incidents and VADER incidents. So after I've given you DASA and VADER, now I'm going to tell you something new. The state has recently changed that, and the next thing that you need to know is SSCC. So then we can't have an education program without all of these acronyms. So the SSCC stands for School Safety in the Educational Climate. And this really is very new this year from the state. And essentially they're looking at taking all of that information. So when a district reports information about any incidents that occur within the district, they've redone everything and it's now called SSEC. And districts are reporting that way, and we're in the process of doing all of that as well. I share that with you because one of the important things about the state movement to this SSEC concept is that it really is promoting school climate initiatives and promoting social emotional learning. So with this change at the state level, there's more of an emphasis on preventing any negative incidences and how districts can move forward with that as a part of the culture and climate in districts. I'm hoping that you've seen that this is an important part already of what we do in our district, and our social emotional learning is certainly a very major piece of climate development in the district. The focus of SSEC is to look at non-punitive ways to support positive behavior in youth. So there are certainly punitive ways to do that in disciplinary processes, et cetera. But the focus again is on looking at prevention and early intervening when there might be children who have some difficulty with their behaviors, which could have a negative impact on others. So in each building, we have a Dignity Act coordinator. And if you go into any building, you should see posters around that will have the names of all the people across the district who are identified as Dignity Act coordinators. Additionally, on our website, you could go on our website and even type in the search bar, Dignity Act or DASA or any of those things, and you'll be able to find the folks that are at each building who are trained to investigate and look at any incidences that may be concerning to students, staff, or families. And one of the premises of looking at this from an anti-bullying perspective, from the SEL type perspective, is that we know that bullying cannot flourish or happen when there are positive supportive relationships between teachers and students and among students, and where there is that kindness and understanding of each other's perspective that takes place. We do know that in environments and climates like that, there is less bullying, and that's a desire as we continue to move forward. You've heard some of the things that we talked about tonight, such as the compacts or the norms that children develop with their teachers in their classrooms, so that they are looking at how they behave towards each other and what is the desired behavior towards that. And obviously from a policy perspective and from our values and vision and mission, you can see that there's an emphasis there as well. Students who are aware and can manage their emotions also have the greater opportunity to show care and concern for others. So when we look at some of these social emotional activities and mental health supports, we know that when there are those positive relationships, we can reduce instances of bullying and disruptive behavior. There is a standard process for reporting any of these situations that come to the attention of the school district. Schools are required to collect certain information. We also are required to develop a documentation system that we maintain all records in. We also have to develop certain forms and complete them, et cetera. And also, if there are any reports, that the school districts are required to keep those reports until the youngest person involved in any incident is 27 years old. I am not sure how they came up with that 27, but that is the newer requirement from the state perspective. There are 9 categories that we need to collect information on. Anyone that may have familiarity with DASA or VADER or any of those things may know that in the past there were 20 categories. So not only is the state looking to kind of combine some of these efforts and work toward prevention and intervention as a first level of success, they also really tried to hone in on not making the tracking of this so onerous that you really can't tell what's happening. So they looked at these particular categories that we need to collect information on. Now, the state does look at these across all districts in New York, and it's through these type of formulas that they identify any persistently violent schools or schools that are persistently having problems and then need certain interventions at the state level. Certainly that's not where we fall, but we certainly report anything that has to do with any of these areas in our work. So we talked a little bit about this not being less punitive, but I certainly want to be clear that when there are very serious or egregious incidences that could occur, there are specific disciplinary measures which are outlined in our policies and procedures, et cetera. But looking at this from a gestalt or a bigger perspective, we're really looking at how do we help children understand their behaviors from a restorative perspective. Our staff is being trained in restorative practices and understanding those types of things. How do we use our positive intervention supports to enhance our culture and climate of acceptance, empathy, several of the things that we talked about tonight. Other items involved in there are certainly we work with students and families around counseling and conflict resolution and mediation. Our school climate efforts are just tremendous across all of our district, from the things that you've seen up on the screen tonight to taking a walk around our schools to seeing what's happening, or to asking your children questions about some of the things that are happening in school. And I don't know about you, but my children didn't always tell me what was going on in the school or what was up in the school, so I had to make it my own business to go and check that out myself. Certainly our school policies, anything related to any of these activities, are reviewed on a regular basis. In coming to you this evening, we also thought it was real important to talk about how you can help and how we can partner together around culture and climate and promoting positivity in our work. And certainly we encourage you as well to talk to your children about these things and talk about what's happening in school and what happens at home. How do you make your home a bully-free zone as we try to make our schools a bully-free zone? Talking about ways to negotiate social relationships. Some of the things that you heard about tonight, some of that social thinking and social emotional learning is really helping children understand how to navigate and negotiate social relationships that they will have with their peers and with others in their school buildings. We can all look to model appropriate use of the internet and social media, which can be an absolutely wonderful tool and also be a problem for some children and youth. We want to think about how we as adults talk to others and talk about others, making sure that we're modeling for our kids appropriate language, even when we disagree with others or we have differences that we need to resolve with others. We also ask families to watch their children, as I know you do, and look for any changes in their behavior or their emotional status, because those are indication that they may have some struggles going on either at home or at school, and that we want to work together to take a look at that. And as always, we certainly ask you to partner with us as parents and school partners so that we're really looking at these things together and we're using some common language to support kids, and that we're asking them to recognize that there are multiple adults in their lives who care about them. It's a very important component for our youth as they're growing up, not only to know that they have supportive families at home, but they have adults beyond their families who are supportive of them. Some of the things, Melanie mentioned a couple of them, and there are several things that go on across the district in looking at some of those school climates in terms of some touchstones and what it means to be a learner in a particular building and how do we engage students and staff. And you'll certainly find that these link back to the vision and values and mission of the district. Spirited, together, respectful, original, nurturing, and genuine is Mendon High School's touchstone. So they really look to promote that as a part of their culture and include that in all of their work. The center one there is the Midnight Way, which is the Calkins Road work, and then the ACES, which is over at Allen Creek. So most of our buildings have that. Each of our buildings have some version of a social emotional learning committee where these things are explicitly talked about and plans are developed and implemented tailored to each of the building. Melanie mentioned a little bit of mindfulness there, that we've engaged in that throughout the district, and it's very interesting to have conversations with our students and ask them what these things mean to them and how this impacts their learning. I had an opportunity to talk to students in a fourth grade class who do a very quick, maybe 20 seconds transition mindfulness activity as they move from one work activity to the other. And so I asked some of the students, what is this? What does this do for you? And this young man said to me, well, when I listen for the music, it makes me calm, and then I'm ready to go on to my next task. So we also know certainly very clearly that when students are not calm or they're stressed or they're troubled, they have a difficult time learning. You may have heard the terms that stressed brains can't learn. So the more that we're bringing that calmness to the students, I think we help them in their learning process. Some of the other things that are going on that reflect some of our work and involvement are projects such as Rock to Change. You may be familiar with this, or some of you may not be. There are students at our high schools who participate with, I'm going to say 500 other high school students across our community in race summits. And as a matter of fact, there's one this Friday. There'll be a race summit, and our students come together with others from all of our public, private, charter high schools that participate in this initiative, and they really have deep and meaningful conversations around race relations, and then they look to develop plans to take back to their individual schools and districts to make a difference in the lives of the kids within their high schools, for example, and within their districts. Our kids have done a phenomenal job with that. Rock Kids Connect is an exciting opportunity that we have where we partner high school students from our two high schools with the Puck Achieve Middle School, which is a charter school in the Rochester City School District. We do school exchange days where the kids visit each other at the other buildings, and we work together to discuss real important issues around kids from different cultures and backgrounds and how we understand each other better, and then how we recognize and celebrate the differences that we have, and also recognize and celebrate the things that we have in common. Best Buddies is an exciting movement for students with and without disabilities to come together in a variety of ways and to break down the barriers of exclusionary practices for students with disabilities. Our district has really embraced this, and I think we're the only district that has the elementary version. So many other districts are involved with this in middle school and high school, and we also have it at the elementary level. Sources of Strength is an exciting project, again, at both of our high schools. This is an evidence-based project that essentially is a suicide prevention project as it was developed. It takes a look, again, at culture and climate in school buildings, and students provide the leadership for this. They are trained and they provide the leadership. Fundamentally, the goal of this is to normalize help-seeking behaviors. Oftentimes, youth, particularly teenagers, will not seek help or don't think that they might need help. And the goal of this project is to normalize that, and it's been extremely successful at both of our high schools. Our schools, our middle schools and high schools, have gay straight alliance clubs and diversity clubs, and we have a wonderful opportunity to welcome and celebrate our families who join us from all over the world in our English language learning program. And we do a welcome evening for them each year with very favorable feedback. And they feel very, very happy and welcome in our community, which is exciting. Melanie talked a little bit about some responsive classroom information, some of the things, again, class meetings, compacts, et cetera, really helping students to intentionally talk about and solve problems, where they are using certainly some of the skills that they're developing, but recognize that there's a process to do that, and you can do that in a peaceful way.
Relative to the areas that we're trying to model continuous improvement, we are growing, expanding tremendously our Kicks for Campers program, which started last year at the middle school level, with the goal of being able to allow all of our middle school students that are urban suburban to spend a week at Camp Corey that would be scholarship through the district. Gene Strazabasco has been amazing. The teachers have been coaches for the kickball teams. We have all played different roles as far as referees and visitors. And last year, I think we raised $11,000. And I think we're really close to right now at Caucus and Barker being able to send all the students through to Camp Corey. This year, it's going to be even bigger. We have extended the amount of teams and offerings and grade levels to participate in the Kicks for Campers. Our role in the urban suburban program is areas that we continuously monitor and try to do everything that we can, and knowing that the work is never done as far as making students that have to get up at 4:30 in the morning from Rochester and leave their home and get on the bus and travel to Pittsford and enter a whole different climate and culture, and doing our best to make them feel like they are a Pittsford student and a valued member of our school district. You've heard tonight about some of our thinking relative to a systems level approach. I want to highlight the area around utilizing data-driven decision-making, really looking at ways to find areas using data versus conjecture relative to things that we need to celebrate and things that we need to improve on. We have a lot of ongoing and concurrent work as far as partnering with different stakeholder groups, our professional development, and we have more work to do with the development. We're getting really close of this inclusivity committee through our district planning team and then with the Board of Education, and continuing to evolve with the evolution of DASA and Vader into SSEC. So with that, I would just want to echo what the beginning of this evening and saying thank you for being here. I know that was a long presentation. It was longer in February, and we were able to take some of this out of it.